When you think of a trip to Asia, before anything else, the first thing to come to mind might be the street food. Pulling up a plastic stool along a busy road and ordering something grilled or stir-fried, and soaking in the incredible atmosphere. But across the region, street food is under threat. Just like how the practice once disappeared from New York and London. Today, as economies grow, push carts are getting pushed out, and Bangkok is no exception. For 10 years, the government's considered banning the city's iconic street carts, and what you might not expect is that's not unpopular. Half the city wants them gone, and that's created a major divide and a debate that seems heading in one clear direction. So today we're taking on the issue, sitting down with a good friend who's tracked this story for half a decade and laying it all on the table, the pros and cons of street food, and what might come next here in this city. This is the Talad Phlu intersection as it looked when we taped a story on it in our second video ever, back in 2022. And this is what it looks like today, completely cleared of street food. All the push carts there for generations put into a lottery with the winners moved inside a brand new market under the nearby highway overpass. It's jarring, but when you think about it, this has been a long time coming. The movement to get rid of street food picked up steam as far back as 2015, when much of Sukhumvit was forced to clear out. Then 2 years later, at the same time as the city was named World Street Food Capital, the government voted to ban all of it. But there were protests from vendors, and in the end it would be walked back, although all that's done is slow down the inevitable. 15,000 carts are moved from the streets on average every year starting in 2021, and while there are still another 100,000 remaining, well, this does seem to be the new strategy, to follow the Singapore model and move the qualifying carts indoors, and shut down everything else that remains. I found out about this market and more new ones under construction from my friend Gary Butler, the Bangkok-based YouTuber who's followed this subject for half a decade. So to get a perspective on what's actually happening, I asked him to join me for a chat. You know, I lived in Hong Kong when street food was cleared out. There used to be the streets of the Dap Dons, right? The guys selling chili crab and everything else. And that's done, you know, in Hong Kong. Everything's kind of moved into what they call cook food centers, or it's just been kicked out. You know, as cities modernize, and there's no question, if you've been to Bangkok 20 years ago and come back now, you're going to see a city that's modernized. No question that, you know, the trend, like, we don't think of the West as being a place for street food. You go to Asia for street food.
Street food, right.
But if, you know, we're watching these for OTR, we're looking through old videos all the time trying to find footage to use, and like, you look at New York in the 1920s, and it's street food. And there was a point where, you know, that was what the West was, London was, right? And obviously, like, things modernize, and one of the first casualties is street food. And so we're kind of looking at a future where, to me, it's pretty clear that there will come a time where there is no street food in Bangkok, as perceived as street food.
I think that's going to come sooner than people think. I've been saying it a lot. I think 10, maybe not even 15 years. I think this is gone. Not this, but I mean, street food as we know it in Bangkok, I think is finished.
So I want to have that conversation because this is something where if you'd asked young me, if you'd asked Adam at like 25, my first trip to Asia, like if you'd said, hey, you know, they're going to ban street food. I remember when they banned it in Shenzhen when I was living there in 2010 or 2011, and they started kind of cracking down on street food. And I viewed this as the greatest tragedy in world history. And I think, you know, the more time I spend here on this side of the world, the more I kind of, it's not that straightforward and simple, and I don't even know how I feel about it. And so I want to kind of unpack that with you today.
See, I don't know where I sit in this argument, because when I did that video, obviously I got a lot of comments on the video, and a lot of people were saying, because I think I opened the video with, fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, this is the future of Bangkok street food or something like that. And a lot of the comments were just like, I'm in the unfortunately camp. I can't believe you're doing this to Bangkok. You're ripping the soul out of the city. Not me, obviously, but And then the other half of the comments were like, oh, that's nice. Yeah, no, it's clean, sanitized. They're not getting rained on. They don't have to close on random days when it's raining, or they just, like for instance, it's rainy season now, right? You could go out, set up your cart, spend 5 hours cooking something, ready to sell, and then the heavens open up and no one's leaving the house. So what are you going to do with your food, right?
And I find that there's also a disconnect in people who are here versus people who are not here and how they respond to that kind of video.
Oh, 100%.
On Instagram, we have an Instagram, otr.offtherails, because we hadn't decided what OTR stood for yet. So it's otr.offtherails, Instagram. The most viewed reel Daria ever posted on our Instagram was one that we taped in Chinatown a couple of years ago of just somebody cooking an egg. Because you want to get viral on Instagram, you just film somebody cooking an egg. Yeah. And that one had, I don't know, 10, 20 million views, something like that, right? And the comments were overwhelmingly angry and negative.
Really?
From people in Thailand who, if you translate the Thai or you read the Thai, it was like, that is the biggest problem in Chinatown. It blocks the sidewalks. We can't walk, it's there illegally. And the foreigners are watching this and they're writing like, oh, this is so cool, this is why I want to go to Asia. I want to start, first of all, before we kind of get into the pros and cons of all of this and the whole purpose of the video and what Bangkok might look like, you know, if it becomes a Singapore, right? You know, what Hanoi would look like without street food. What all these things are going to, you know, let's first start out by kind of defining what we're even talking about. Because I think this is something where you watch a lot of YouTube videos and you see people posting like walking around a night market and saying, oh, I love the Bangkok street food. We're not talking about, markets are markets.
That's they're different. Not going anywhere.
You know, Jay Fai with a Michelin star for street food. It's not street food, it's a restaurant. You know, and this is where I think as sometimes we romanticize this idea of street food where if the restaurant doesn't have air conditioning and it's street food. It's street food, but that's not under threat. That's still here.
No, that's not under threat. That's not under threat. I mean, it is under threat, but for very different reasons. So.
What we're talking about specifically is carts that are mobile. So kind of the first thing I want to do is play a little bit of devil's advocate, right? So what does that mean? Like you or me or both of us can take on the role of we are outlawing street food. We are the ones who are there. Will be at some point, like in Hong Kong, the policy was basically like you had to get licenses to be a vendor on the street, and then they stopped giving out the licenses. And that was how it eventually stopped. And it was, you know, and in Singapore, it was more like all at once. We're just, and in mainland China, it was the same, where it's just, you know, killing a fly with a shotgun, right? Like it's done. And there was no recourse there were no hawker centers like what you just showed us around.
You're gone.
It was just no more street food. You cannot be outside selling food on the street. It's unsanitary or whatever the reason was. So let's play devil's advocate first. Let's look at the reasons why that would be the policy. Why would you, as the government, say, or as Gary Butler say, you know, and I have a couple of reasons, but like, let's start kind of with the negatives of it and why it makes sense for somebody to want to clear out street food. Why would you put that policy in place to say no more, moving it inside or getting rid of it?
Why would I do it?
Why
would the governor of Bangkok?
Yeah, I mean, why would somebody do it? And I think we can both see...
The arguments would probably be food hygiene and food safety. What we talked about earlier about
keeping the sidewalks
clean, no rubbish, no oil being poured down drains, no rats, no garbage lying around. If you were being cynical, it would probably be so you can definitely collect your taxes, electricity, rates, like rent, to collect rent, more revenue, and less people working for cash, I guess.
I think the two big ones are the first two that you mentioned, which are food safety and hygiene. You know, I think the disposal, like the cynical view of, well, we can charge people rent if we make it official, that's obviously a factor. And, you know, and that's where I think people get upset about banning street food, but let's talk about the hygiene and safety part of it, because that's realistically, like, that is a thing. That's not
definitely a thing. And this is completely anecdotal because there's no way to prove this yet, but like, I've eaten street food or food that we agree isn't street food, but could be street, it's like cooked in the same way as street food, right? And very rarely have I been sick, but I have been sick many times in Thailand from restaurant food or hospital food or Western food.
But we also realistically are picking and choosing our battles.
Yeah.
I'm not eating seafood from a street cart, personally.
Yeah, okay.
And I know some people do, and that's just me, but I do have that sort of sense of self-preservation where there are some things that I want to know that the kitchen's been inspected if I'm gonna eat shellfish, for example, that's sitting out.
But if so let's say that the kitchen's been inspected, but you don't know how the staff have been trained. So how would you, like, if I know, so for instance, pad thai.
But we're supposed to be playing the negative role here.
Sorry. Go on.
I understand that we can poke holes in all of these. I just want to look at why you would outlaw street food. I've said this to Gary. I don't know, if we've already used this in the video, but this is the thing for me is we were talking about this off camera a minute ago, but I have a hard time. I'm a guy who's a big street food advocate, right?
Yeah.
Street food advocate. I feel more happy in a city where you walk around and there's street food everywhere. I love that visually, but like, is it when it starts to be on your own street? And as you said, you have 2 small children now that your 5-day-old isn't walking yet, I assume.
No.
But like, when you're out having a walk on the street, or you're pushing the pram with your new kid. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much.
For me, it's when we're walking our dogs, and there are 3 or 4 street carts on our street that block the sidewalk completely. And then customers come and they park their motorbikes outside, in front of the curb. And so as you're walking down the sidewalk, and Bangkok sidewalks are quite narrow, the only way that we can get around it is to walk into traffic. And
No. With
cars, where I live, we're kind of in a central street. They fly. It's stressful.
For sure.
I don't want to be that guy who says that, like, oh, it affects me, so therefore outlaw it for the city. That's not fair. But at the same time, I can see why. For example, there were so many people writing negative comments on our video about that egg, because that's something that triggers a lot of people here.
But you could point that back to, like, the people that are worried about, like, and locals or tourists, the people that are worried about people blocking sidewalks and cooking eggs on the side of the street don't have to worry about making ends meet by cooking an egg on the street. That's my view. Like, so every argument you make, or every argument someone makes, I can't disagree with. But it's okay for me to look out of my window and say, I don't want that there. But whoever's down there is generally worse off than me, so who am I to tell them that they can't?
Which brings me to the most important part of the positive argument.
I know that's not what you're saying.
No, I agree with you. And that brings me to the other point of this, which is that, if you're a migrant who comes to a new place, like, I think that a big problem with my own country, and with your country, with the West in general right now, is it's almost impossible without much money to start your own business.
Too many regulations.
You just can't. It's just. We talk about deregulation in America. Deregulate. What does deregulation mean? In politics in America, deregulation means deregulate big companies. But it should be about deregulating
the everyday people.
Like, you shouldn't need. We take it for granted that you need to spend $50,000 on a liquor license to start a restaurant. That's crazy. Why? It's free. You buy a carton of cigarettes for the guy, and you get your license. And this is where, having this option. How many stories have we done, Dennis behind the camera? How many stories have we done here on OTR? How many stories have you done on your channel where you talk to somebody who has this powerhouse of a restaurant, and they're like, oh, it started with my grandfather having a street cart. It started with my dad had this street cart. My mom had this street cart. I had this street cart, and then we saved up money and we opened this business.
And
this is something, the hair on my arm stands up. This is something that it's always the story that you hear, and it had to start with that first step, with given some opportunity to start a business. And a business can be, you buy a cart and you pay a 7-Eleven a little bit of money to set up outside, or whatever, and you
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
that was a much more eloquent way of saying what I was trying to say. That's basically the point I was trying to make. The point you just made was the point I was going for.
Well,
basically.
okay, well, you know. When you talk about the end of street food, the first place to come up is always Singapore because of the iconic hawker centers, which for better or worse would become a part of the national identity. World-class food courts on one hand, a symbol of everything lost by modernization on the other. They're reminders of a very different past, but at least the reminders still exist. Almost everywhere else, street food culture is simply gone and forgotten. Singapore began its transition from the old street food scene all the way back in 1950, when the colonial governor referred to vendors as a public nuisance and threat to hygiene. Without access to fresh water, a campaign was started to warn locals of potential outbreaks of disease. And after independence, in 1968, the streets were cleared and vendors who passed safety checks were pushed to back alleys and designated areas. Then between 1971 and 1986, all 18,000 remaining carts were relocated to new hawker centers, indoors and subject to frequent inspection. The first crackdown on street food might date all the way back to 1689 when the Japanese Edo rulers banned vendors because of the risk of fire from cooks using open flames. Then the Meiji government pushed their own bans 200 years later, claiming fast food was ruining the national heritage of delicate homemade meals. And finally, after World War II, when ramen carts exploded across the country, a new wave of restrictions was passed. This time because of trash dumped into sewers and left behind on sidewalks. Hong Kong's Dai Pai Dongs are 20th century casualties. Starting in 1956, the government stopped issuing new licenses, and a few years later restricted transfers only to a spouse, so if a vendor died unmarried, the license would expire. By 1983, sellers were pushed to sell their permits back to the government, and the remaining carts were moved into cooked food centers, though because of the scarcity of land, only a few were ever built, and most hawkers simply disappeared. Here, the reason given was mainly for clearing the sidewalks to make it easier for pedestrians to walk unimpeded. From the thousands that once existed, today only 17 remain across the territory, a number decreasing every year. Everywhere street food has been outlawed, it's accomplished whatever purpose was stated in justifying the movement, but it's also played a major role in gentrification, pushing the working class out of city centers and dramatically raising the cost of living, and it's even changed cuisine, with certain dishes once the domain of street vendors disappearing or becoming reimagined as higher-end restaurant dishes. But not every crackdown has been successful. With enough public pressure, there are examples of cities where the practice has been preserved, and here in Bangkok, well, that window is still open, though it's closing fast. So let's talk then about the other argument. So I think we've both kind of come to the consensus that, like, we can take the hit on the sidewalks, let migrants make their money, and let people have, we want to keep, if we want services to be cheap in Bangkok, if we want, the cost of transportation to be low, things like that, we need to keep providing, it's like the Klong Toy Market video, we need to keep providing accessible food at low prices, and at some point when you move everything indoors, the prices are going to rise because people have to pay more costs. But let's talk about the other argument to this, which is the food safety part, right? So do you know, and I don't know, is there a mechanism for inspection of street carts, or is it a free-for-all?
Not sure.
I'm not sure either. If somebody's watching this, send us a message if you know this.
My mechanism is to get to know the street food vendor and then find out when their seafood comes and whether they use it again the next day. That's my mechanism. But so for instance, this leads me back on to my pad thai guy, right, who is now inside, right? So I know that he gets his seafood from Mahachai every day, right? His prawns, okay? They are kept on ice or refrigerated and then kept on ice, right? So they'll be fridged all day, then kept on ice, then he cooks it. There's no leftovers, they don't use them the next day, right? I don't know that, for instance, a restaurant that we might frequent that looks clean, that's been inspected, I don't know what they do with their prawns in, not this restaurant's very clean. Yeah. But I don't know what they do with their prawns, and I don't know how their staff are trained. I don't know, they might be using their prawns a week later. So, although on a whole, of course, food hygiene standards would go up, but at the same time,
I feel like you have swung yourself very much
I
towards
swung myself right back towards
defending street food, and that's probably how I feel about this too. You know, that it's hard for me to. The more I try to make the contrary argument, the more I kind of find holes in them.
But this is what playing devil's advocate does, right? So if you just started with the positive argument, I would have come up with some negative.
Let's try that.
Connotations.
Let's try that for a second. Go ahead and while you eat, I'm going to make the positive street food argument. You're going to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Well, let's try this. So I want you to but don't talk yourself out of it.
Okay.
Don't then second guess yourself. I want you to. We're a high school debate team. A combined 83 years old, whatever you and I are, but we're a high school debate team. We're gonna. So I'm gonna defend street food, and you're gonna play devil's advocate.
Okay.
All right. So, in my opinion, first of all, it is not up to, in a free society, people should be allowed to make a living, right? I think that the idea of we restrict everything to follow a certain amount of templates, that's not freedom. Freedom is you want to start a business, start your business, right? It's let the free market decide. If people think that your food's no good, you'll go out of business.
Yeah.
If you're providing a good food at a good price, right? Then you're going to succeed. Nobody who has a street cart that I'm aware of, that is their lifelong ambition. Their hope is to save money and do something bigger.
Yeah.
It's a first step. For somebody who, how many people do, like we were taping in Sumatra, we were just, you and I off the air talking about the Maidan video. That's how Ansha, 15 years old, right? Dropped out of school, doesn't have any money, but, you know, gets literally a table on wheels and goes to the market every day and buys a little bit of food and then sells it at a slightly higher price. And every day you end up with a little profit. That's how you make money with nothing else, no other option. And then you save up money to do something else. So, first of all, I think people should have the freedom, and I believe this isn't me. This isn't me saying this for the channel. I believe that, you know, the less we regulate human beings, you know, why did I move to China in the first place? I moved to China in the first place because I'd never felt that free, which as an American sounds crazy. But I remember I got there, I landed at midnight, and the girl I was dating at the time, we go sit down on a curb for street food. Somebody's just stir-frying noodles. She walks into a convenience store, buys 2 beers. In America, sitting outside drinking a beer, you're arrested on the spot, unless you're in like South Carolina. Like you get arrested on the spot. You know, but here, you know, who's going to tell you not to? It's still, whatever. If you own a bar like I did in Shenzhen when I first came there, if you own a bar and you want to stay open past 4 a.m., stay open. It's your business. Do what you want with your business. So sitting outside on the street, somebody just walking by, pushing a cart, stir-frying noodles, getting 2 beers from the convenience store, sitting on the curb, that was what I felt so free. Like I can do anything here. And as I learned to speak Chinese and I got to know the people and the culture, you start to understand that everyone who's the first generation to leave the family farm is just about how do I keep taking these steps towards building a better life. It starts with maybe, you know, working a little bit of, you know, the lowest paying factory job, save up money to get a street cart. You buy your street cart. Now you're gonna work the next 5-10 years, save up as much as you can, and then maybe build that into a restaurant, expand that, or you just go into some other field with the money that you've saved. But it's a chance to gamble on yourself, to do something for you. That's my first argument. The second argument is what you brought up earlier, which is that we are not the target customers. Bangkok, the average income in Thailand is still quite low compared to what you see in Sukhumvit with these beautiful cars and, you know, LV stores everywhere. For somebody who's making, I think if I remember right, and I could be wrong, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but I think the minimum wage is somewhere around 8,000 baht per month, right, in Bangkok City.
Oh, that sounds high to me.
And that's just in the city. It sounds high to me, as I'm saying. But let's say it's 8,000 baht per month. It might be substantially lower. But what is that? That's in US dollars. It's 250 bucks per month, roughly, right? So now.
Oh that's about right.
So $250 a month.
Let's just call it $10 a day. I know that's more than that.
Let's call it $10 a day. So then, from that $10 a day, you are supporting your family, like children. You're maybe supporting your elders in your family who are back home in your home province. You're paying for your rent, you're paying for transportation, and your food budget is, you know, normally you're eating at home, you're at work, right? You have a break for lunch. What you're gonna go here?
Exactly.
Spend 250 baht on a clay pot rice that we like. 250 baht for a day, $10 for a day. This is $7 for this clay pot rice, and it's worth it. It's delicious.
It's great, but
you know, what are your anyway, that's my first arguments for street food. The third argument, and I'll let this be the last one because I got to let you talk. But the third argument is just going to be that it makes Bangkok more diverse and better, and it's colorful, and it just feels like the heartbeat of the city is.
I guess the arguments for the first one, I can't even come up with like a. I guess you could look at a big one would be waste management, right? So like, we already have a massive problem in Bangkok with pollution, waste management, etc., etc. So I mean, that's kind of like you've got a load of unregulated stalls on the street pouring oil down drains. You don't know where the rubbish is going, the trash is going. So I guess that's just adding to the problem. Like if you take this hawker centre, for instance, they've actually got their own designated area where they're separating all of the trash out into recyclables, wet waste, food waste. So guess that would be one argument. The other argument could be, we keep talking about it, but like blocked sidewalks, right? So for me and you, I'm talking about pushing my kid, you're talking about walking your dog, which is important, obviously. But what about the elderly, disabled? Like, if your grandma can't walk down the road, all she wants to do is go down and get we would say like a pint of milk or something, but they just want to go out, get some rice, get their groceries, and they've got to walk around 6 street food carts and 15 grab bikes. Probably not the best. Another one would be, we're talking about food hygiene again, right? And that can be debated, but obviously a street food cart isn't under the same scrutiny as a restaurant. There's no accountability, there's no comeback. You get sick at a street food restaurant, there's not really much you can do, right? But if suddenly 10 people get sick in this restaurant, there's accountability, right? Because you can trace the food, you know where it's come from. And also, we're looking at street food and street food carts as like the underdog, right? Like they're just making ends meet, but some of them aren't. Some of them are doing a roaring trade, right? So then you could argue that it's not fair on restaurants. It's not a fair fight, basically, because they're not paying the licenses that the restaurant has to pay. They're not under the same.
That's a great point, by the way.
Yeah, right. They don't have the licensing fees. They don't have the electricity they've got to pay. They don't have the water they've got to pay. Et cetera, et cetera. So.
I think that there is a big, just talking through this isn't something I thought about before, but I think that there is everything works hand in hand in the economy. And what that means is we talked about this again in the Klontoy Market video, but for street food, if you outlaw the idea of push cart street food, right? Then prices go up. What happens if prices go up? Then the people who are providing services for very inexpensive costs can't afford to eat out anymore. They raise their prices because they have to make more income to survive. That happens, everything slowly
goes up and up.
And that seems to unfortunately be something that's not speculative. That's what's happened in your home city, in my home city, and this is what's happened everywhere. It's happening in Bangkok now, with or without any effect on street 100%. Food. But all of these things work. It's not in a vacuum. You don't clear out street food, but you still expect to pay low cost for transportation, low cost for rent, low cost for services. Like it all starts to go up when you take out the services that are provided to the migrants. I don't have a follow-up to that. I'm just
I'm with you.
That's a thing that's going to happen.
Yeah. So,
and if the takeaway of that is the average salary goes up and everybody has enough money to be able to come here and eat, then so be it, and that's probably a good thing.
Does that happen?
But does that happen? And if it doesn't happen, then who are the victims when you clear out street food? They're the lower economic class, which is always the victim of everything.
Always, in every country.
Country, Me and Daria were just in Jakarta for a Foo Fighters concert.
Yeah.
And when we were in Jakarta, not for taping, when we were in Jakarta, we went down. There was a Papua restaurant that I really wanted to try, and so we went and took this long car ride down towards like this this part of South Jakarta that we really wanted to go try this one restaurant, and that took us through these winding roads through part of the city that we would never have gone to otherwise. And you know, the big dish in Jakarta that you see at street carts everywhere is bakso. It's the meatballs, right? Chinese meatball soup. That's everywhere. That is the street cart dish of Jakarta. In restaurants, some serve it. That's the street food dish. So we're driving through this part of the city and we see a bakso meatball factory. This giant warehouse above this like broken down house where there's a bunch of people with street carts collecting their bakso meatballs for the day to go out and sell. Now, this is why I bring this up. During COVID, when the bars were shut because of people congregating for bars, right? All the headlines, all the articles about this were about bars. The bars are shut. You can't go to bars. How is this affecting bars? How is this affecting bar owners? How is this affecting customers? At the time, Daria had a beer company she was running. What didn't get publicized is the knock-on effect. Okay, the bars are closed. What about the importers of the beer? What about the guys who are driving the trucks who are distributing it? This entire economy was decimated. And you only see the public-facing side of it, the bars. But what you don't see are the brewers, the importers, the distributors, the delivery guys. At my restaurants in Shenzhen, I used to love this sort of shadow economy that forms of I finish a case of beer, I take the cardboard, I put it outside, and there's the cardboard lady who comes by and collects it, and she makes her money from the cardboard. There's people collecting all the glass bottles, you know, all this stuff, and then there's the street food vendors who would show up outside at closing time, right? And then they would sell their food to people who were leaving, and there's this little shadow economy that forms. And that's all decimated too, but they don't get the headlines because it's just about the bars, and we don't see the other sides of this. These street carts are getting their food from somewhere, right? There are some dishes that are specific to street food that you don't really see in restaurants. What is that in Bangkok? What are the foods that if you walk down a busy street on Sukhumvit or something, what foods are typically sold from street carts?
Morping, so grilled pork on sticks. I mean, that, just alone me saying that out loud, that's put me back in the cannot be outlawed camp, right? Because I can't live without those.
Restaurants don't serve that. That's a street food dish.
Sausages on sticks, saikoki-san, which you can get in restaurants, but any type of grilled meats. You've got I suppose you do have restaurants, but like a lot of like bak mi modeng, like
Hainan chicken rice. You see
Hainan
a lot
chicken
of
rice.
that.
I mean, obviously there is Hainan chicken rice restaurants, but mainly they're from carts.
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
That would be a problem, right?
There's what do you call it? The sticks of like the processed sausages and
which aren't
the
for
hot
me.
dogs outside. Not for me either, but like you'll see that outside 7-Eleven. Kids like that.
But then
Kanam Tokyo, that's a street food. That's a street cart thing. Yeah.
Kanam buang. And then if you outlaw that, do you then have to outlaw the fruit sellers? You know, the fruit sellers walk around selling pineapple, melon, and mango. Now, do they have to be regulated?
And if they do, then how does that affect the farmers?
Exactly.
And the Talad Phlu, the markets that are selling all these.
And then, if I can't go outside and, like, if you're a kid and you're a school kid, you can't go outside and just grab a piece of mango. So what are you going to do? Go to 7-Eleven and buy candy. So what does that do?
That's a great point.
Effect.
That's such a good point, that if you take out the street food, all it does is drive people towards more chain stores, things like that.
And again, like, a more conspiratorial...
Neither of us are doing good being devils. I was supposed to be playing the negative side of this.
A more conspiratorial mind would point towards that anyway, right? Because, like, most of the food now is controlled by, like, big conglomerates here, right? So why would they not want more, like, centralization?
Thailand is not immune to. The world's biggest seafood conglomerate. It's a Thai company.
Yeah.
Since Bangkok's government is using Singapore-style hawker centers as a model for the new street food crackdown, I figured I'd shoot a message to Anand Khandelwal, a good friend of the channel and someone involved in the early days of OTR. He's living in Singapore now, and while it's easy to find YouTube videos of the giant tourist-focused hawker centers, I asked him to walk down to the nearest one to his own apartment to give us a quick tour of what in practice they actually look like, so we can understand what we're talking about.
Hi. So, in case you don't know, Singapore has this concept of government housing. This is one of the buildings. These government housings are located all over Singapore, and most of these places have a small collection of restaurants, which is called a hawker center. So here we see happy hawkers. This is just below the building. It's lunchtime right now, and this is a smaller hawker center. It has about 7-8 stalls. The standard practice is to have a drinks stall. So we'll start off from one corner. You can see the board. There's Hong Kong street food. We come down. There's some traditional food. Stalls are always available for rent. And we have a lot of pork, a lot of duck, and all sorts of food.
What does a successful Bangkok look like?
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
So let's backtrack for a second. Have you been to Singapore before?
Yes.
What's your opinion of a hawker center? That idea of replacing street food with shoving everybody into these buildings. They're all over. Every neighborhood kind of has.
I've only been to Singapore twice for one day each, but I didn't see Singapore before the hawker centers.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, this is Singapore. They've got hawker centers, which is great. But then, in the last couple of weeks, they've had like a record number of hawker centers shutting in Singapore, right? Due to rising cost of living and stuff like that, which is affecting people here as well. So I'm not sure.
That's a good, and you made that point earlier, and I'm not trying to kind of immediately just.
No, you're not.
No, let me say this for the camera, by the way. Gary and I started this conversation talking about neither of us really know where we sit on this issue. And I'm interested as we talk through this, how seeing my own, I can see your opinion changing. Gary started this. We were talking off camera outside. And Gary was like, no, it's probably the right move to get rid of it. And as we start talking, he's getting angry and angry about getting rid of it. And I think that's true that as we talk through
this.
It's
such a divisive subject.
It's a divisive subject that there is no clear answer on, but I want to look at why it's okay how this can be executed in a way that's, I think what you pointed out about Singapore, where when you are going from owning your own business to paying rent to somebody else, then you lose control over what you're doing. In Singapore, if you charge people more and more for their spot in the hawker center, well, no one's being charged for their street cart that they're pushing around outside, and you pay a little bit for your spot, or but if some people do, you don't have to. You can go somewhere where you're not going to get the same amount of foot traffic. If you're outside of a BTS station, somebody's getting some money from you being there. But
allegedly,
or even illegally. I think that the reason why, and I'm just speculating, and you can please don't sue me if I'm wrong about this, but I think the reason why, for example, one of the places you always find street food carts, mobile carts of street food outside 7-Elevens is because that's part of the 7-Eleven business model, is they get money from people. And I'm guessing, but it seems like that's how it works.
That would make sense.
And if they own that property, if that's their sidewalk to use, and they sublet out some of that sidewalk space to guys selling hot dogs to elementary school students, and everybody's happy.
That's good business.
It's good business, but if you're now in these organized centers like the one in Lupini, like the one here, and then somewhere in a few years, owners start raising the rent on these people, it changes the dynamic of what it is, and it changes the level of access for a new migrant coming to the city to sell something.
I think I'm not trying to be hypocritical either, because I don't. People assume I just eat street food. I don't. So I eat in all different types of restaurants, and a lot of times I'll eat in. If I'm out during the day, I might go grab some aircon in a shopping mall food court, right? And as great as those shopping mall food courts are, for especially for people coming who aren't too sure about going out on the street but want to try a little bit of cheap street food, it's great. But they are a little bit more expensive. To me, it makes no difference. Again, I might be paying 90 baht for a dish that I would pay 50 baht for outside. So it makes no difference to me, but does make it inaccessible for some people. Whereas this market that we've just been to is essentially all the same food at the same prices, just under shelter. And we've spoken to a couple of the sellers today, and the answers, oh, how do you like it compared to before when you were out on the street? Oh, well, we don't get rained on now, it's clean, etc., etc. That's great for them.
But
right?
this was a spot that's under a highway overpass in an
Yeah.
open area.
So
in Prompong or Sok, downtown, where do you move the carts?
I know,
Where do they go?
I know. But I mean, we've just come up with that's just giving me an idea for anyone watching from the government. Why not regenerate all of these underpasses into Orca centres? It's perfect.
Even if we all somehow agree that a Bangkok move to a Singapore-style hawker center model is ideal, well, that doesn't make it realistic. Where we are here at Talad Phlu is on the Thonburi side of the river, half an hour driving from the main urban area. And the new center at Lumpini, well, that's being built in one of the only wide-open spaces close to downtown. With most of Bangkok now highly developed and with property values skyrocketing, the unfortunate truth is there are only so many ways to preserve a culture that might have its flaws, but has meant the world to a lot of people. It's been an opportunity for migrants to make a living, and in a male-dominated work culture, Thai street food has brought an income to generations of women, 80% of the street food workforce, according to official estimates. The tradition in its current form dates back to around the 1890s, when Chinese Thai vendors set up stalls to cater to the new working class as the city began to industrialize. They'd set up outside factories and on new streets like Soi Charun Krung, selling bowls of soup or snacks like chive cakes and stuffed wontons. It was from these carts where a new genre of food took shape. Chinese techniques adapted for the local palate, becoming pad kapow, Thai fried rice, and even pad Thai, all sold from street carts before ever appearing in restaurants. The 1950s would see another boom as Bangkok became a destination for migrant workers, the growing economy drawing peasants from the Isan region. And while dad might join a construction crew or work a blue-collar job, mom would bring in income making food. At first meant for other migrants, but eventually introducing to mainstream culture to somtang, gayang, lemongrass stuffed fish, and sayoa, or Isan sausage. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, it was in many ways street food that allowed Bangkok to thrive. International companies and foreign tourists drawn to the city by the cheap prices. But those prices stayed low because locals could live on next to nothing. And that allowed a new generation to build up savings, improve their own lives, and gave rise to a new middle class, which would, by the early 2000s, build the high-rises and shopping malls that began to force out the street food that made it all possible in the first place. This, once again, is not unique to Bangkok. The same story's been told over and over, and it's not always a bad thing. It means a city's making economic progress. Living standards are improving and big changes are taking place. But it's still worth considering exactly what it is that's lost forever.
I just got this through.
Okay.
As a local, this concept is a lot better than what it has been in the past. Most of the street food shops didn't have proper organised, leading to hygiene problems, rats, cockroaches and flies. Moreover, many, but not all street food tends to pour their waste into public drains, which leads to flooding in some areas. This hawker centre, designed to solve the problems, I wish this thing to succeed.
So this comment just did a better
It
job
just
of playing
came up,
devil's advocate than either of us did.
So NCNUN, NC none, you've just solved the argument.
Your video that you did about this, would you say that the comments have been overwhelmingly in one side or the other, or is it pretty split?
Pretty split. I would actually say most Thai people, the comments have been like very positive for the market.
Yeah.
And then, as we were saying earlier, most foreigners like us, that don't live here,
Yep.
they're against, basically.
Outlawing street food. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're the foreigners that don't live here. Therefore, I cannot believe you would get rid of this. But the Thais and the locals are all like, this is a great idea. This is a happy medium.
Look, I can take pictures of my street flooding. And I'm not blaming street food for that happening.
Do you know what? That didn't even occur to me.
Didn't either.
Actually, that did not occur to me at all. That would be some of the problems. Of course, because you're pouring oil down the drain. When you have a heavy downpour, suddenly people are swimming down Sukhumvit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another for against.
I think the one thing we've learned from this conversation is that this is a very complicated issue that neither of us, we're both happy that we don't have to be the ones to make this decision.
No, it's a different
I think if I was the one in charge of Bangkok to make this decision, I think I would probably lean towards being very hands-off.
Yeah.
Do it, but I also feel like that it's probably a good thing that I'm not the one who's making that call.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say if I was the one in charge, I would move to Chiang Mai.
Interesting topic, and I appreciate you covering it, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Is there anything that we didn't bring up that you want to make sure we get in about this?
No, I think
we've talked this through as much as either of us.
I think we've done a good job.
I think
you did a good job, not so much me, but
I think we talked about as much of this as you and I are able to talk about, but I think there's sides to this that maybe people in the comments can illuminate better than we can, or that somebody thinks of that we didn't. But cool video that you did. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that someone of your talents watches my videos. I feel like I've won a prize today being on your channel.
We were just outside, and I was getting asked to hold the camera to take pictures of people with Gary. So no, we're both. I'm the one who's with the celebrity right now. Gary, thank you so much.
Man, thank you so much.
Congratulations on the new child.
Thank you. Thank you. I am taking donations if anyone.
To be honest, I came into this shoot today, believe it or not, on the side of I kind of think that they should ban it.
Yeah.
I kind of came into the shoot today on the side of people who are watching this who think I'm Mr. Street Food, and I am to a degree, but I see firsthand on our street whether it's a lot of flooding, sidewalk issues. I come into this kind of thinking, like, you know what? It's the right move to kind of start going towards a different system.
Yeah.
After talking about this for so many hours now today, I think I've kind of now swung back towards being like, nah, this is too important. It matters, right?
If you say, if you ask me, I mean, I think I don't know, I'm still torn. Still very torn, but I think keeping them, I mean, not banning them, it's gonna, I don't know. I don't want the soul of the city to die, the soul of the country to die, what the country's known for, just because it inconveniences us a little bit. But then again, it is safety issues as well, food safety, whatever, I don't know. I don't have a direct answer.
There's a part of me that's glad I'm not the one who has to make those decisions.
I know, man. What are the benefits of getting rid of street carts on the street?
It benefits 7-Elevens, it benefits chain stores, it benefits... That might have been my favorite of Gary's points, actually.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, for example, where I live in Rayong, every lunch, dinner, we usually will go to a street cart that's right on the beach. But every time he's closed or he's not there, we walk literally right across the street to 7-Eleven. So, people are going to be turning more to chains, to more, I guess, like corporate businesses, 7-Eleven, Lawson, whatever. Yeah. Street food is generally cheap, I mean, you can get pork on a stick with sticky rice for, what, like 20 baht, 30 baht, right?
Or even less, 15,
even
10,
less. You could get the same thing at 7-Eleven, but it's more expensive.
And your money's going to 7-Eleven, not going to somebody locally.
Exactly, and it's not as good.
The topic of what to do about Bangkok street food vendors is one of the most divisive issues across the city. And while we might not have the answers, please weigh in the comments with your own take on the issue and any side of this that we might have missed. Because ultimately the path forward will be shaped by public perception. And as we saw in 2017, when the directive was ultimately withdrawn after public outcry, your voice does matter, and it might be up to you what happens going forward. So keep the conversation going. Subscribe to the channel for more from OTR. Thank you so much to everyone who supports us on Patreon. It really helps to keep us going. Find links below to our Patreon and social media, and we'll see you soon.